Her confirmation as the new U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts was a controversial one, but controversy is nothing new to Rachael Rollins. When she ran for Suffolk County DA back in 2018, she got national attention and plenty of criticism for a list of crimes she said her office would not, in most circumstances, prosecute. A proposal both local and national police associations called dangerous, soft on crime, and claimed showed a reckless disregard for the law. But more than 70% of Suffolk County voters disagreed, electing her in a landslide, making her the first black woman ever to serve as Massachusetts District Attorney. And when she put those policies into action, her priorities seemed to pay off. According to Boston Police Department data from earlier this month, which shows violent crimes were down by more than 20% this year compared to the 5-year average, and property crimes like burglary and car thefts were all down 14%. Despite that, after Biden nominated Rollins to the U.S. Attorney role this summer, Republicans in the Senate did their best to stop a vote from even happening. And when it finally did, we heard arguments like this one.
God help you if you don't want violent criminals robbing your store. God help you if you don't want drunken, homeless people setting up tents in your front yard.
Yeah, but crews aside, with unanimous support from Democrats and Vice President Kamala Harris having to make 2 trips to Capitol Hill to break ties, Rollins was confirmed Wednesday, becoming the first ever black woman in this job, too. Rachael Rollins joins me now. A U.S. Attorney, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Jim.
I should be clear, I just called you U.S. Attorney. You're not yet the U.S. Attorney. You're still the Suffolk DA until you're sworn in.
I'll take it. I'll take it. But yes, I am technically the DA until I am sworn in as the U.S. Attorney, correct.
Why did you want this job? You go from a job where you have virtually total autonomy to having a boss who lead you have to follow, in this case, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Why would you say yes?
Well, I believe we have a proof of concept here in Suffolk, and I think it should be brought up to scale for the rest of the Commonwealth. And Boston right now is one of the very few major cities in the United States of America where violent crime is down. And why shouldn't Lowell and Lawrence and Lynn and Holyoke and Springfield and Worcester benefit from the excellent work that the Boston Police, the Mass State Police, Transit, Winthrop, Chelsea, and Revere Police do with the Suffolk County DA's office? So when asked, I was humbled and honored. And, it has been a long road to get here, but it is all the sweeter because of how hard it was.
But how do you apply that, what you call proof of concept here? I mean, you're most known for those 15 crimes where the rebuttable presumption is you won't prosecute. My understanding, there aren't that many minor offenses on federal statute books, criminal statute books. Are there, or am I missing something?
You aren't. And in fact, as U.S. Attorney, I won't be saying these are the type of crimes I'm going to be flipping the presumption on. Remember, Jim, as you know, I have near complete autonomy as the DA and report to no one but the voters of Suffolk County. And as U.S. Attorney, I report up to the Deputy Attorney General, the Attorney General, and the President of the United States. So what I intend to do is use many of the great things we've done in Suffolk with respect to training and transparency, with respect to educating different communities about all of the services that we can provide as the federal government. Remember, Jim, we have a whole civil branch. We have a civil rights unit. We have obviously terrorism and national security, economic crimes. There is a huge reach, both on the civil and the criminal side, that the U.S. Attorney's Office has that district attorneys don't. So I intend to use some of our policies, maybe not refusing, or declining to prosecute or a rebuttable presumption, maybe not that, but certainly the cultural competency and the going into communities and explaining what we can do and hearing from them what they want our government to do for them.
I just actually, after having said couldn't think of any minor offenses in the criminal code, I just thought of potentially one. How about marijuana cases? Are you going to prosecute any marijuana cases?
Great question. There's a few areas where the state law, depending on what state you are, and the federal requirements or laws are in conflict. Immigration, for example, we saw that erupt back in 2019, and I was proud of the position I took as DA with DA Ryan in Middlesex regarding ICE. But of course, as the U.S. Attorney, you defend ICE when they're sued. Similarly with marijuana, where our Commonwealth has legalized medicinal and recreational marijuana, it is still a crime federally. My intent is to look at significant distributors, right? Massive drug, kingpins with respect to marijuana. I'm not looking to bother somebody, Shaggy from Scooby-Doo who's smoking a doobie somewhere. We want to make sure we are focusing on the people that are trafficking weight and significant amounts of marijuana. We've heard, Jim, that there's an uptick potentially in fentanyl in marijuana now. So we have to be diligent with respect to the unregulated marijuana that might be coming into our Commonwealth.
One matter that does concern me that will be part of your jurisdiction once you're sworn in is one of the worst things that's happened in the state in recent years is the death of more than 70 veterans at Holyoke. And while I'm sure most people watching know that the criminal charges brought against the two leaders of the Holyoke Soldiers Home were dismissed by a judge a couple of weeks ago, my recollection is that, I think it was last spring, maybe last summer, the U.S. Attorney's Office here with the Department of Justice began an investigation into what happened in Holyoke. Is that continuing? Is that something you intend to pursue as U.S. Attorney?
I was deeply disappointed to see that those criminal charges were dismissed. I was proud that our Attorney General brought them in the first place, and those soldiers deserved far better than they received by our Commonwealth. And Jim, my father is a veteran, and I believe those men and women should have been staying at the Ritz-Carlton, quite frankly, and not at this place where they died. So if that case is still pending, and I have not been briefed yet on all of the cases that are currently pending at the U.S. Attorney's Office, that is going to be a high priority for me. But I promise you, Jim, there are excellent lawyers at the U.S. Attorney's Office. They are working hard. Acting U.S. Attorney Nate Mendel is excellent, as was U.S. Attorney Andy Lelling. So I'm looking forward to being briefed on those cases.
You think Andrew Lelling did an excellent job as U.S. Attorney?
I think Andy Lelling absolutely brought some really important cases. I like to point out that I feel like the Varsity Blues case, it's a good example of showing the difference between what a DA does and possibly what the U.S. Attorney's Office does. I told you I respect Andy immensely because I know how hard the job is. We were both the chief law enforcement officers for offices of about 300 to 350 people. And it's very easy to sit on the sidelines and complain and talk about things that you don't know. So I don't have a fight with U.S. Attorney Lelling.
Can we return to your confirmation for a second? I was unaware until the day of the vote that there had not been a roll call vote in the Senate on a U.S. Attorney nomination in half a century. I'm sure you knew that. 80-some U.S. attorneys, most recently nominated by President Trump, sailed through without roll call votes. We all know that not one Republican voted for you. And actually, we should play a little sound from the Republican who led the fight against you, Senator Cotton. Here he is.
Ms. Rollins appears to measure success as a prosecutor not by how many victims and innocent people she protects, but rather by how many criminals she keeps from facing consequences.
What's your reaction to what Cotton said, what Cruz said, and the fact that not one of the 50 Republicans thought you were fit to be the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts?
Well, we'll prove them wrong.
That's not the typical
reaction.
Rachael Rollins. I'm sure there's more in your head and heart about...
In my bun. Yeah, no,
I'm
Jim,
serious.
listen, I'm serious too. It's not worth a reaction. Our numbers speak for themselves, Jim. My first year as DA, we had a 20-year low in homicides in 2019. In 2020, when the world experienced a global pandemic, we had 2 more homicides than the 5-year average. We had 53 instead of 51. And this year, homicides are significantly down. Those are extraordinary numbers. And I will not take credit for them because I did that work with the Boston Police, the Mass State Police, Chelsea Winthrop Revere, and Transit Police. But I will tell you, I promise you, if those numbers were skyrocketing, I would have been blamed. So look at our numbers. Boston should be a gold standard for places like Arkansas and other places where the murder rate is skyrocketing right now. So I'm proud of our track record. I pledge to work incredibly hard with my law enforcement partners, and we're going to continue to make sure that the crime trend is down in Boston and the rest of the Commonwealth.
I only have a couple minutes left. Is there something undone that you hope to finish before you leave, or that your successor finishes in the Suffolk office?
We intend to release some discharge integrity team reports that I am working hard to make sure that we speak to the community about. I've already met with the families, or our office has spoken with the families who've lost their lives in an encounter with law enforcement, and then with the members of law enforcement as well. I want to get that done before I leave, and then hopefully one more town hall if I can, but I'm not going anywhere, Jim. I'm going to be at the Moakley Courthouse, and hopefully in DC maybe once or so a month. But I intend to work very closely with the 11 district attorneys across the Commonwealth, as well as the Attorney General and other law enforcement partners.
I just have a minute or so. I want to ask you one specific case, though, that you and I discussed before, I think in September. Tyrone Clark was sitting about 6 feet away from me the other night after being released after serving almost 50 years in jail for a rape conviction that was vacated with your approval a couple of weeks ago. When you were here, I believe in September, you thought he deserved compensation. Yet while the rape charge was vacated, 2 other convictions based on, I believe, the same testimony were not, which may stand in the way after 50 years of incarceration from him being compensated. Do you intend to do anything about those other 2 convictions before you leave?
I don't believe so. We have a lot of other cases, but the extraordinary relief that Mr. Clark received as a result of that victim coming forward, and again, we need to talk about how brave that individual was. By coming forward and saying that she could no longer stand essentially behind her identification. It's hard standing up for what's right when people are constantly questioning you. I am incredibly proud of the times that I have stood firm and said that justice was not done, and done the right thing, and not opposed a motion just because the Commonwealth always does, but rather stood up and said, I will not put my name on a conviction that was secured either unethically or unconstitutionally, or is no longer supported by eyewitness testimony. So I'm very proud of what we did with Mr. Clark, but we have that victim to thank for that.
I just briefly, if I may, when I was thinking about Senators Cruz and Cotton's comments that you didn't want to respond to, was there any trickle-down impact of what they and their colleagues had to say about you?
Of course. A lot of people don't recognize, as women and as women of color, and particularly as a Black woman, the level of racist, hate-filled death threats that we receive. My security team is fielding calls with people using the N-word and saying they want to put a bullet in my head. And, they know I have children. Nobody signs up for that, Jim. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. And as I told you before, I want to do this important work, but being a mother and a guardian to my nieces is far more important than being a DA or a U.S. attorney. So the trickle-down effect of hate is, potentially violence, and we have to be better than that. And I sincerely hope that, the people in Washington are a little bit better. And I think, and I want to work on the language we use when we disagree with each other, because it really matters.
I wish you a lot of luck in your new job. Congratulations yet again, and good to see you.
Always a pleasure.